Previously on Tongue of the Serpent, the past has begun to answer where it was once only buried. Mercy chose to stop waiting for memory to arrive gently. The Renault sisters kept pulling old blood and older language into the light, and at the crew of the Morning Star, the quiet around Lucien and Evelyn sharpened into something watchful. Morvant is not finished. Neither, unfortunately, is the city. This is Season 3, Episode 21 of Tongue of the Serpent, Ghost Roads. The roads the dead use. New Orleans has more roads than the city planners will admit to, and more than God probably intended. Some of them are honest roads. They are made of brick and shell and bad municipal decisions. They flood when they ought not, crack when no one is looking, and run past porches where old women knew precisely what happened in 1978 and would be delighted to tell you, provided you have all afternoon and the proper respect for iced tea. But those are only the roads for the living. The dead have their own. They travel by memory, by grief, by names spoken once too often in the dark. They move along old promises and older sins. They follow blood, music, unfinished business, and the kind of regret that settles into a family so deeply it starts paying property taxes. Some dead vanish cleanly. They slip loose from the world like a ring from a thin finger and are gone before the room notices its own emptiness. Some are tethered, some are hunted. Some keep taking the same road over and over, not because they are lost, but because something at the end of it keeps refusing to let them arrive. That is the trick of this city. People think New Orleans is haunted because it's old. That gives history far too much credit. The city is haunted because it does not believe in clean endings. Grief here moves like a streetcar on a fixed track. It circles, it rattles, it comes back around at inconvenient hours and asks whether you really meant what you said all those years ago. Ghosts come in different temperatures. Some haunt, some testify, some linger like unfinished sentences. Some are bargains that closed wrong and have spent a century sulking over the paperwork. Evelyn stood beside the fountain with the careful stillness of someone approaching an injured animal or a dangerous truth. The unspelling had left a taste in the house. Something lingered in the air, touched equally by smoke and blood without settling into either. The spiritual taste of a locked drawer forced open after too many years. The air had got thin in odd places. Mirrors watched too closely. The whole crew seemed to be listening inward, as if waiting to hear what in it had begun to awake. Evelyn looked down into the water. For a moment she saw only her own reflection, tired-eyed and steady, haloed by courtyard ironwork and the old New Orleans moon. Then she placed her fingers against the stone rim. Evelyn inhaled sharply. The fountain changed beneath her hand. The water darkened with age, with memory. The courtyard around her blurred at the edges, its lines softening like wet ink. People like to say time in New Orleans was slippery, but that gave it far too little intention. Time here lingered. It listened at doors. It waited for someone foolish or gifted enough to touch the right stone. And suddenly, the courtyard was not empty. Pierre Devereux stood beside the fountain. He was younger than Evelyn would have expected, but not in any way that softened him. The face was different from Lucien's in coloring, yet close enough in structure to catch at once. The same fine bones, the same elegant mouth, the same composed, watchful stillness in the body, as though standing itself were a form of performance. But where Lucien bore his mother's ginger clothing, this man was dark, unmistakably French Creole, handsome in a richer, older way, like something stepped out of an ancestral portrait and into the garden air. Evelyn knew him instantly for what he had to be, not Lucien, but the source of too much of him. Pierre Devereux, and the rest of the man followed quickly after. The polish, the vanity, the grand and cultivated selfishness. He wore ambition the way some men wore expensive scent, too generously and with absolute faith that it improved the room. Morvant stood opposite him. At first glance, he might have passed for respectable. That was the worst thing about him. There was nothing obvious to warn the eye. No horns, no shadows crawling in impossible directions, no grand demonic theater for the simple-minded. He looked like a gentleman, a well-made one, carefully assembled one, as though someone had built a man out of charm, appetite, and good tailoring, then forgotten to include a soul. His face held a patient smile, but it was the sort of patience a spider might have if it had learned table manners. Pierre said with the tight control of a man pretending he had not already crossed 3 moral lines to arrive here, that Morvant had said the family required an offering. Morvant corrected him at once.
No,
he said.
Greatness required an offering. Families were simply where the bill was sent.
Pierre's jaw shifted, only slightly. He asked then in a voice made careful by greed whether the Devereux name would endure. Morvant seemed faintly amused by the word.
Endure,
he said, with such a dreary ambition. Mold endured, regret endured. He was offering something finer than that. Significance, weight, a name that would settle into the bones of the city and remain there. Influence, longevity, a bloodline people would remember long after remembering had become inconvenient. Pierre took that in the way a starving man takes in the smell of food, and when he answered, it was with less caution. He did not want mere remembrance, he said. He wanted legacy. He wanted the family to matter in New Orleans, not for a season, not for 1 generation. He wanted a great and glorious dynasty. Morvant's smile altered by the smallest degree. Then, he said, the thing would have to be fed properly. Pierre moved. Only a step, but enough that Evelyn, caught within the vision, saw what had been standing just beyond him. A child, Annalise, still a toddler, still round at the hands and cheeks with babyhood. Too young to stand anywhere near that conversation without the world itself seeming indecent for allowing it. She had that solemn softness very small children sometimes have, as though they only just arrived from somewhere kinder and have not yet learned the local customs of cruelty. Pierre rested a hand on her shoulder and said this was his younger daughter. Morvant looked at the child and dismissed her almost at once.
No,
he said. Pierre turned to him, not yet angry, only thrown off balance. No?
Too young.
Morvant said.
Her future has not opened enough yet. Potential needed shape before it was worth taking. At her age, she was promise in theory, and I prefer my meals more specific.
The words seemed to pass through the courtyard like a draught from a tomb. Pierre's mouth tightened. At the edge of the memory, another presence hovered, indistinct but near enough to matter. A woman, perhaps Antoinette Devereux, though the vision would not hold her fully. She was more outline than body, more consequence than person. Pierre did not look at her when he offered his wife instead. Morvant barely glanced in that direction.
Too old,
he said. Pierre stiffened at that. Morvant clarified with the coolness of someone discussing quality rather than life.
Not old merely in years, but in trajectory,
he said.
Most of her becoming is behind her. I am not interested in what has already happened.
The fountain water gave a small, unnatural shimmer, and Evelyn understood then, with a coldness that seemed to move through the vision and into her bones, that this was not bargaining at all. It only wore the clothes of bargaining. Beneath it was something uglier and far more ordinary. This was inventory, valuation, the measuring of human lives by use and ripeness. Then Morvant paused. He turned his head slightly, like a man hearing music from another room, and he smiled.
The boy,
he said softly.
The boy, however.
Pierre changed all at once, tightening, hardening. He was too composed a man to show his emotions plainly, but his whole body locked. Something in him went rigid with instinct before pride could smooth it over, and he said no with a force that made the word sound older than the conversation around it. Morvant did not seem offended. If anything, he sounded pleased.
Lucien has gifts,
he said.
The veil is thin around him, and will remain thin. He will draw things to him. He will survive what lesser men do not. There is music in that future. Blood, devotion, ruin. He would be exquisite.
Pierre answered at once that Lucien was his son. Morvant said,
Yes, that is part of the appeal.
Pierre's voice hardened. Lucien was also his heir, he said. He needed a son to carry the line. The Devereux name would not become a dynasty on daughters and charm. At that, Morvant grew very still. Surprise had nothing to do with it. This was delight. There are moments when vanity, after a long evening in borrowed finery, finally removes its gloves and shows its hands. This was one of them. Pierre Devereux stood in full at last, stripped of all the noble words he had been using to dress his hunger. He was simply a man with a crest, a scheme, and a hierarchy in which everyone else existed beneath his appetite. Morvant's gaze shifted past him then toward something just beyond the edge of the memory. Another child, older than Annalise. She was not visible in full, but felt, bright with unrealized life, trembling with possibility, a soul standing at the edge of what it might one day become. Sabine. Morvant considered her. That consideration was somehow more terrible than hunger would have been. Hunger has honesty in it. Hunger takes or lunges or devours. This was refined. This was taste. He said,
"She has a great deal of potential."
Pierre said nothing. Morvant added,
"She is almost as gifted as the boy."
The silence that followed felt thin and sharp enough to cut. Even the fountain seemed to hesitate. Then Pierre asked very quietly whether she would suffice. Morvant smiled then, and the smile narrowed to something elegant and cruel.
"For what you want,"
he said.
"Yes."
Then he let the pause linger just long enough to show the shape of the wound before pressing on it.
"For what she is worth,"
he said.
"Not nearly."
Evelyn jerked back. Her hand flew from the stone as though it had burned her, but the chill remained in her palm, and with it the knowledge, not the whole of it, not yet. Visions were rude house guests. They arrived drunk, dropped one terrible truth in the parlor, and left before anyone could ask sensible questions, but enough to know that the road had begun here, at this fountain, with a father doing sums in the dark. Sabine Devereux had not been resting. She had been returning again and again by some invisible road. She had come almost to the edge of distance, only to be called backward before the dark could finish taking her, drawn not to a home full of memories and love and childhood happiness, but by something meaner and older and terribly precise. Sabine Devereux was not haunting this house because she loved it. She haunted it because something kept sending her home unfinished. The house after the name. The Krewe of the Morning Star was quiet, the way haunted places are after a wrong turning, listening. The courtyard fountain sat in the center of the space, like a thought no one wanted to think all the way through. The water was still enough to feel deliberate about it. Mirrors around the house had developed a very slight hesitation, as though reflections were taking a moment to confer with their attorneys before agreeing to appear. In certain rooms, the air pressure dipped without warning, and doors breathed against their frames like old women preparing to gossip. In the back room, the angel egg remained quiet, which was not the same thing as harmless. The angel egg had the watchful stillness of a child pretending to be asleep, so the adults would keep talking. Renard Blackwood was gone, returning to his carnival family for a final goodbye. Cassian was off with Mercy, following whatever thin and dangerous threads might lead toward Lenore. Alice, with her genius and her knowledge, Celeste, with her sensitivity, were tucked away in the Marigny, which meant the house, for the moment, belonged to the ones left behind. Lucien, with his grief-sharpened into manners, Evelyn, with her impossible steadiness, and the lingering sense that everything said on the rooftop the night before had not settled so much as sunk its teeth in. Lucien had not slept. He had changed clothes, which in his case was sometimes mistaken for coping. Evelyn had at most sat down with intention and allowed exhaustion to pass politely through the room without actually claiming her. She stood near the fountain with a mug of coffee she had long since forgotten to drink. Her right hand still ached, though nothing showed. The stone had left something in her palm when she touched it, the afterimage of knowledge. She could still see Pierre Devereux standing where Lucien stood now, all ambition and polished rot, bartering futures as though his children were created in units of currency. Lucien stood opposite her, One hand braced on the stone rim, staring into the water as if it had insulted him personally. For a while, neither of them spoke. The house did enough of that on its own. Then Lucien said, very carefully,
Morvant does not feed on death.
Evelyn looked up. No, he feeds on what never gets to become. Lucien's mouth twitched, humorless.
Unrealized features, the unspent. Possibly before it has the chance to turn into disappointment, taxes, or character.
That sounds like the devil's version of veal, Evelyn said. Under almost any other circumstances, he might have smiled. Instead, he said,
Lucifer all but said Morvant wanted me.
Evelyn remained quiet for the moment. She had the good sense to know when a sentence was still bleeding. Lucien's gaze remained fixed on the water.
I have spent most of my life trying not to follow that thought to its conclusion.
The courtyard seemed to lean in. He wanted you, Evelyn said quietly. He said so. Lucien looked at her then, sharply, intently.
You know that how?
Evelyn set the mug down on the fountain rim. Because the house showed me. A hush fell over the courtyard with recognition, the kind of silence old houses keep for truths they have been storing under the floorboards. Lucien said nothing, so Evelyn continued. I touched the fountain after the unspelling. I saw Pierre here, Morvant with him. Your father offered Annalise first. Morvant said she was too young, that her future wasn't shaped enough yet. Then Pierre offered your mother. Morvant said she was too old, that her becoming was behind her. Evelyn's mouth tightened. Then Morvant asked for you. Lucien's hand closed convulsively on the stone rim. Evelyn did not soften the next part. Some truths resent upholstery. Pierre refused because he needed his son, his heir. A Devereux man to carry the name and build the dynasty he thought he deserved. There it was, spoken as direct and unvarnished as accounting. Lucien, with all that untouched future in him, Lucien with the old Devereux charm and the sharpness and the terrible capacity to matter. Lucien, before age and guilt and compromise had rubbed the shine off him, a son, a future patriarch, a bright and promising branch on an old and diseased tree. And their father refused to surrender him because Lucien was legacy, because Lucien was an investment to be protected. A handsome promise the Devereux name intended to cash in over several generations, which left Sabine. She had been what was left when power needed feeding and patriarchy reached for the nearest, softer throat. Lucien shut his eyes.
When I was younger,
He said,
I told myself whatever happened to Sabine was a horrible, stupid, tragic accident. But this was chosen.
Yes, Evelyn said.
This has design in it.
Yes, he laughed once. It was a small, ugly sound.
You might at least pretend to spare me.
I am sparing you, Evelyn said. I'm sparing you the lie. He looked at her then, and she did not flinch. He didn't save you because you were beloved, she said. He saved you because you were useful. You were preserved like property. That landed more painfully than Lucifer's rooftop revelations had. Supernatural horror could still occasionally be filed under curse, devil, family nonsense, occupational hazard. But there was no filing system in the world that could soften the knowledge that your father had weighed his children, his wife, and chosen which one would best serve the house. Lucien turned back toward the fountain. For a moment, the years seemed to fold strangely around him, and Evelyn could see the younger man and the older one, the 9-year-old boy who had found Sabine's body by the same courtyard water, the son who had been told in 100 elegant ways to keep silent, the man who had spent decades mistaking unanswered grief for mystery when it had been murder curated into respectability all along.
She was the child who could be spent,
he said. Evelyn sat in the quiet. Some truths deserved a moment of silence, if only so the room could understand it had been insulted. Then she said, "Yes." Lucien's voice dropped lower.
and Morvant took her because my father wanted a glorious dynasty and thought daughters were acceptable collateral.
Morvant considered her, Evelyn said. He said she had a great deal of potential, almost as gifted as you. That hurt him. She could see it, because it made the arithmetic even colder. He exhaled through his nose.
So, he sold Sabine for a future that never even arrived.
Evelyn glanced toward the shadowed hall that led deeper into the house. Men like Pierre never imagine the dark can cheat them too.
At the moment,
Lucien said.
Everything appears dangerous.
That's because everything in this city with teeth has started smelling blood. A hush settled over them again. Then Lucien frowned. In the surface of the fountain, a figure moved behind him. A young girl in a pale dress with dark hair, recognizable in the way a wound is familiar. He turned immediately. The courtyard was empty. No one stood behind him. But in the water, Sabine was still there, not looking at them, walking away. She was walking with purpose, with terrible effort, as though she were trying to reach some far point beyond the house, beyond the quarter, beyond even the city itself. Then the image shuddered. Sabine jerked backward, as though something had seized her by the spine, and pulled. The water rippled, and the reflection broke. Lucien went still. Evelyn stared at the fountain, her expression sharpening into thought. When she spoke, her voice was quiet enough that the house had to lean in to hear it. "That's not a ghost pacing," she said. "That's someone trying to get somewhere." Evelyn and the rebound. Lucien left the courtyard with the air of a man going to exhume paperwork, and perhaps several generations of disappointment along with it. Evelyn watched him go, then turned back to the fountain. The water had resumed its stillness, but it was no longer the innocent kind. It had the look of something that had remembered it was older than plumbing and considerably less interested in being useful. She rested her palms on the stone rim and let herself think. That, contrary to popular superstition, was often the beginning of real magic. Not the drama of ritual, but thinking and attention, the willingness to notice a pattern before it noticed you back. Sabine had come to them in pieces. In dreams first, but not ordinary dreams, Evelyn thought. Dreams were usually nonsense wearing a borrowed hat. These had been closer to messages left in a language sleep could almost speak. Next were the mirrors, then the fountain, and then the pressure around windows and reflective glass. That strange thinning of the air that felt like a room taking a breath and forgetting to let it go. And always the same problem. Sabine never quite arrived. A fading spirit went thin around the edges. It lost definition the way old lace lost integrity, one thread at a time, until all that remained was pattern and wishful thinking. A trapped spirit circled. It worried at the same place, the same room, the same grievance, until haunting became less a condition and more a hobby. A spirit sharpened by vengeance became clearer, meaner, more deliberate. Rage was marvelous for posture. Sabine did none of those things. Sabine approached. Sabine reached. Sabine almost became, and then something yanked her back like a fish deciding at the last second that the hook had opinions. "That's wrong," Evelyn murmured to the water. "You're wrong." The fountain, being a fountain, offered no rebuttal, which was just as well. Evelyn distrusted talking architecture on principle. She drew a little line of salt from the pouch in her pocket, just enough. She let the grains fall into the basin with a soft white hiss. Then she said gently, "Sabine." After a moment she added, "You may come as far as you are able." The water trembled. It shivered the way a body does when someone touches an old bruise by accident. Then the surface changed. Evelyn saw Sabine at a doorway, one hand on the frame, as though she had nearly crossed from one room into another. Before she could step through, she jerked backwards out of sight. Another image followed, Sabine in a mirror, her face pale and intent, lips moving around words the glass refused to carry. Backward again, as if the reflection itself had seized her and swallowed the sound. Then Sabine, waist deep in water that was not the courtyard fountain and not, Evelyn suspected, any water that had ever known sunlight for charitable purposes. Her arms strained toward the surface. She was pulled under before she could rise. Then one final image. Sabine with her hand against stone, burial stone, maybe crypt stone, the kind of stone that has been taught to keep secrets by men in waistcoats and by things with older teeth than men ever had. Then she was pulled backward again. The fountain stilled. Evelyn stared at it for a long moment. Coffee forgotten, pulse unpleasantly steady. "Not resting," she said softly. The words settled into place, one by one, like cards laid on velvet. Not trapped in one place, not crossing either. She looked toward the hallway Lucien had disappeared into, then back to the water. Rebounding. But even as she said it, she knew rebound was only part of the truth. Sabine was not being pulled in a single direction. This was a soul trying to move on and failing. This was tension, a spirit caught between the ordinary gravity of death and the unfinished mechanics of a claim that had never closed properly. One part of her answering distance, while another part still snagged on something with claws in contract law. Evelyn touched 2 fingers to the stone rim. "Something keeps refusing her distance," she said. "Alice arrives from the Marigny." By the time Lucien returned, the house had acquired the sort of silence that suggested it was eavesdropping with professional interest. He came down the hall carrying a journal, 2 folders, and the expression of a man who had discovered that the past, having once again failed to stay buried, had also taken the liberty of alphabetizing itself. Before Evelyn could speak, the front door opened, and Alice Renault came in from the Maroney with a satchel full of photocopies, old translations, notes in 3 different inks, and the exact brittle composure of someone being held upright almost entirely by caffeine, scholarship, and ancestral irritation. Alice had the particular look of an academic ambushed by destiny before breakfast. A professor of linguistics, Lucien's niece, Celeste's sister, and one of the few people in New Orleans capable of making exhausted look dignified. She stood in the foyer, brushing damp air from her sleeves as if the morning itself had been insufficiently peer-reviewed.
Celeste sends worry,
she said by way of greeting.
And a reminder that if either of you dies doing something avoidable, she will be extremely annoyed at the funeral.
That is comforting,
Lucien said.
It was meant to be.
Alice crossed into the courtyard and set her satchel down on the fountain rim with the reverence usually reserved for relics, bombs, or very fragile desserts. Papers fanned out beneath her hands. Photocopies of old ritual texts, margin notes, transliterations, a page so heavily marked it looked less annotated than attacked.
I kept thinking about the fragments,
she said.
Less about what they meant and how they were made.
Evelyn tilted her head. The grammar. Alice pointed at her with immediate approval.
Yes, exactly, the grammar.
There are few things more dangerous than a tired scholar who had finally found the correct mechanism for a problem. They become luminous with intensity.
The runes, the invocation fragments, the funeral language in the Devereux notes, the infernal references from the mirrors, they do not use one category of action. They distinguish between states very precisely.
She shuffled papers, found the one she wanted, and began counting on her fingers.
Offered, yielded, taken, substituted, compelled, claimed.
Lucien frowned.
Those sound like variations of the same sin.
They are not.
Alice said.
Not in ritual language, and not in old legal language either. The verb matters because the verb determines what kind of power is being exercised and what kind of consent is assumed or erased.
Evelyn watched her. You think Sabine was never meant to be read as the offering?
I think,
Alice said carefully,
that Sabine was not simply sacrificed. I think she was substituted.
The word settled over the courtyard like dust on morning clothes. Lucien's face changed, just enough to suggest the word had gone in somewhere soft. Alice pressed on.
And in multiple traditions, substitution without consent weakens the final claim. Cosmologically, not from morality, it creates an instability in the structure. A sacrifice that is yielded is one thing, a sacrifice that is compelled is another. A substitute forced through a tear in the ritual is something else entirely.
Lucien's voice went cool.
Alice.
She looked up once. She knew that tone, family concerned addressed as command.
No,
she said with firmness enough to keep the floorboards from getting ideas.
You don't get to send me out of this one.
I was not sending you out.
You were reaching for the speech where you imply it would be safer if I stayed in the Marjorie with Celeste and my dictionaries, while the adults handle the infernal structure.
Lucien opened his mouth. Alice lifted a hand.
I am already in it. I am family. Also, language is not decorative here, it is evidence. If the bargain was built with words, then words are one of the only knives we have.
Evelyn, who had already come to exactly that conclusion, gave a small nod that amounted to ecclesiastical approval. Alice looked down at the page in front of her and softened just a little.
A lot of the texts care less about death than dissolution. A person can die and still not be properly concluded. The death can happen. The claim can still fail to finish.
The fountain gave a small, involuntary tremor. Alice looked at it, then back at Lucien.
I don't think he finished taking her. I think he only got what the ritual could force through.
Madame Claudette arrives with perfume, opinions, and bad news. The bell above the front door gave a single, offended jangle. Then Madame Claudette swept into the crew like weather-wearing jewelry. She was, as ever, a hurricane disguised in lace, dyed red hair piled artfully atop her head in a style that suggested both great effort and a complete refusal to discuss that effort. Her skirts rustled, her bracelets chimed, her scarf floated behind her with all the authority of a flag claiming newly conquered territory. The room filled at once with jasmine, myrrh, and the sharp electric scent the air gets just before rain remembers it has unfinished business. She stopped in the courtyard doorway, took one look at Lucien, one look at Evelyn, one look at Alice's papers spread across a table near the fountain, like the aftermath of an anxious seance with office supplies, and sighed.
"This house,"
she announced,
"looks like it slept in its grief again."
It barely slept at all.
Tragic for all involved, especially the wallpaper.
Lucien, who had not the strength for a proper response, lifted a hand in something that might once have been courtly acknowledgement and had since become exhaustion with good posture. Alice, still half bent over the pages, looked up.
I think I found a structural distinction in the ritual language.
Claudette set her handbag down with care.
Of course you have, Cher. You look like a woman who bullied 3 dead alphabets into confessing before breakfast.
Alice straightened a little.
The ritual structure implies a substituted vessel under duress.
Claudette blinked once. Then she said,
You mean somebody fed the devil the wrong child and called it bookkeeping?
A brief silence followed. Alice, to her credit, only nodded.
That is a coarser but not inaccurate summary.
Coarse is how truth travels fastest,
Claudette said.
Go on.
So Alice did. She explained the distinctions she'd found in the texts. Offered, yielded, taken, substituted, compelled, claimed. She spoke of ritual grammar, infernal legalism, and the catastrophic importance of consent, and old bindings that behaved more like contracts than curses. At first, Claudette listened with the expression of a woman indulging in an especially promising dissertation. Then Alice said,
Substitution without consent appears to weaken the final claim.
And Claudette stopped being decorative. Her whole face changed, sharpening intently, humor vanishing. It stepped aside and made room for something older.
Yes,
she said quietly.
That would do it.
Lucien looked at her.
Do what?
Claudette folded her hands over the top of her cane and leaned slightly into it, all theater gone now.
The dead have rules, Cher. You know that.
Her gaze flicked to Evelyn, then Alice, then back again.
A soul that goes willingly into that thing is not the same as one dragged by the wrist. A spirit that yields settles differently than one that fights. The world notices the difference, even when men do not.
Alice nodded quickly.
Exactly.
And bodies matter.
Claudette continued.
People always forget that because they prefer haunting to be tidy, a tragic girl in white, a draft in the corridor, a piano note from an empty room. But a body that has been used in blood work does not stop mattering just because the heart quiets. It can stay in architecture, in the bargain, in the road between.
Evelyn's expression darkened with recognition.
And if whoever buried her did it wrong,
Claudette said,
or hid something with her, or left the claim unfinished, then the contact would keep snagging her every time she tries to get free.
Lucien had gone still enough to pass for carved stone. Claudette looked at him, and when she spoke again, her voice had become plain, which was somehow crueler than poetry.
Then the contact would keep snagging her every time she tries to get free.
The room went still because everyone there knew at once. That sounded exactly like Sabine. New Orleans keeps more roads than the living can see. Some belong to memory, some belong to grief, and some belong to the dead who keep trying to get somewhere they are not permitted to reach. In this chapter, an old bargain will begin to show its true shape. A family wound will open where it was first made, and what looks like haunting will begin to reveal itself as something stranger, meaning, and far more deliberate.